The People's Platform.
In a significant gesture of reconciliation, the Netherlands has returned 6 artifacts, including a cannon, a ceremonial sword, and 2 guns to Sri Lanka. The Netherlands, which colonized Sri Lanka in the early 17th century, returned the artifacts looted 250 years ago from the Kandy Kingdom, the last independent monarchy of Sri Lanka. The artifacts were taken from the Kingdom of Kandy in 1765 during the Dutch colonial period. The return of these artifacts is part of the Netherlands' efforts to address historical wrongs and redress the injustices of colonialism. Sri Lanka has been seeking the repatriation of these artifacts for many years and has welcomed the Dutch government's decision.
Every leaf of history either is a victory or a loss, conquering and vanquishing. According to Lord Buddha, no matter you win thousands of battles, if you cannot win over yourself, you may not see the light. The government of Netherlands has seen the light. You have conquered over yourselves, which has been looted from Sri Lanka 3 centuries ago, has been returned to Sri Lanka. For that, we appreciate and admire. You need a lot of guts to do that. The other countries are still thinking over it. We really appreciate and admire.
The return of these artifacts is part of a broader trend of former colonies reclaiming their cultural heritage from European museums and institutions. In recent years, there has been growing international recognition of the importance of repatriating artifacts that were taken during the colonial era. Among the 6 priceless Kandian artifacts returned to Sri Lanka are Liuke Desave's cannon, a bronze cannon inlaid with gold and silver, a golden kastane or a ceremonial sword, a silver kastane, a ceremonial sword, and a mahatuakua or a wall gun. These were originally taken as war booty by the Dutch East India Company in 1765 during the siege of the Palace of Kandy. The artifacts were returned to Sri Lanka by the Netherlands in November 2023 after the Dutch government acknowledged that they had been wrongfully acquired during the colonial period. The return of these artifacts is a significant gesture of reconciliation and a reminder of the complex history between the two countries. The artifacts will now be housed at the National Museum in Colombo, where they will be accessible to the public and serve as a reminder of Sri Lanka's rich cultural heritage. The Dutch embassy said the objects were wrongfully brought to the Netherlands during the colonial period, acquired under duress or by looting. Now, after more than 200 years abroad, 6 Sri Lankan artifacts will be physically returned to Sri Lanka during a 2-day event at the Colombo National Museum on 5th and 6th of December.
I think what is most important, and I already talked about this a little bit, is that now Sri Lanka has its own restitution committee. So anything you think about that you want back, go and speak to the restitution committee. This is what we needed to be able to work on this in a more constructive way. So what we are working on from the Netherlands side is that in the next few years there's money from the government to be able to do more research. So we are focusing on accessibility of the collection, of making that digitally available so anyone can see what we have in the Netherlands. Anyone can work on claims and go to the committee with that. So I think it should become a process that is much more democratic and much more bilateral or multilateral even. And then we can really become partners in a way that we have never been before. So that, I think, is our priority. At the moment, we are working really hard on it.
When it comes to the objects, the cultural objects, we need to have these conferences with the civic society in London, in the Netherlands, in Paris, in Germany. We need to talk, why are you keeping us? Why Nefertiti is in Berlin? They can be proud of BMW, but why? You know, this is part of the dignity and identity. This is my identity. Where are you keeping it? Rosetta Stone, a deal between France and the UK, has nothing to do with the fish and chips in London. They should return it. So yes, having the conferences in these capitals is very important, you know, to bring it to life, to build on this brave decision by the Netherlands.
With our museum, and I think with the Rijksmuseum, that we are so anxious about the gaps or losing objects, that there will be loss. I think that we are actually in a moment right now of change where objects should move, that we are creating new horizons of possibilities for redistributing heritage. And that is something that I think we should celebrate and not necessarily that we should be anxious about. And in that, I do not imagine that any one of our museums in Europe will ever be empty. That won't happen. I mean, it could. But there is no future that I can imagine where they're going to be empty. What might be different is that some objects move to other places. New objects come, we work with more contemporary artists. But we imagine a future where, and I'm going to be really political here, Sri Lankans don't have to come to the Netherlands to see their heritage. They can go to here to see it. And that we will come as tourists to Sri Lanka to see some of the heritage. I even imagine a moment when we will do, and this is where I get really political, we will do a Van Gogh exhibition here in Sri Lanka. And then a few people come here to see it, rather than everybody having to go to Europe. Because one of the struggles, which you highlight, thank you, is as an afterlife of the colonial project, is that if museums in Europe continue to think that they are the best places to keep objects, then museums in Europe will not serve a global population. Visa regimes alone make it impossible for many people to go to the British Museum to see the objects. We have to rethink that. And I think that this is part of the process of rethinking, where we redistribute heritage and therefore redistribute access to who sees what, who has access to what, and actually redistribute dignity that was taken under the colonial project.
But let's look at the bigger picture altogether, you know, and look at, when you go back, look at all your museums and see what is the Sri Lankan things there. If you like, we can come and help you to choose them. But what I'm trying to say is that look at the bigger picture.
How are we going to take this collaboration into the future? Because we have started a very good relationship with the Rijksmuseum. What are the areas that we can further collaborate? My concern is more on the human resources and material resources needed by the museum for conservation. Our conservation training, I mean, with all due respect, Sanuja, to the conservators you have in your institution, object conservation in Europe and in the US, in North America, is taken in developing in leaps and bounds. It is mostly based on scientific research. All conservators are trained in material sciences, chemistry and other sciences, needed to understand the object before you put your scalpel on the object. I think that is something that we are lacking. So if the Sri Lankan government can negotiate with the Netherlands government and the Rice Museum and other European institutions where Sri Lankan objects are being held, we can probably have a multi-country collaboration to train our conservators, train our those who are doing interpretation, curators, and art historians. Actually, art history we can take care of, but conservation, object conservation, we are still not up to the standards that are observed in European museums. Therefore, that is an area that we really need to improve. And my suggestion again, to repeat the same thing that I said, to make this opportunity to have a wider and better collaboration to take care of our object.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of the People's Platform. We're coming to you live from the National Museum in Colombo. My guest today is Dewi van der Weerd, Ambassador for International Cultural Cooperation in the Netherlands. Hello and welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you so much. Really nice to be here.
Absolutely. We meet on the occasion of the Netherlands government's repatriation of 6 Sri Lankan artifacts which were possessed and taken away during the colonial era. Speak to us about the significance of this gesture and what implications it has for the bilateral ties between the two countries.
Yes, so we have been working for years actually with Sri Lanka on returning these objects, and I think it is significant because actually the Sri Lankan authorities had also already mentioned that they would really like these objects repatriated. I think our cultural and bilateral relations have been good, but the fact that we are now able to also work on the return of this colonial heritage is important.
That the country give back items taken without consent. In terms of restorative justice, this is a very significant landmark. Speak to us about how you think other countries too should follow suit.
Well, I think for the Netherlands, this has been important because we were ready for it. We saw that also in our own population, people were looking at our past and were saying we really need to start returning the colonial objects that are in our countries. We want to redress the injustices that have been done in the past. And we want to also use this process to deepen our bilateral ties, because what we intend to do is to do more research together on the provenance of other objects, and we want to also enhance our museum cooperations. So for the Netherlands, this has been a very important process. I see that other countries are also looking at their past, and we are also discussing with each other the different developments, but each country there has its own pace, of course.
Reassessing of colonial history is something that is pivotal and very timely for countries to do. How has Netherlands fared in this respect?
Well, I think for us it has also brought us a lot, because it has given us a new perspective on our history and on the international heritage and the shared histories that we have with those countries where we have been a colonial power. And we see that also if we look at our younger generations, these are topics that they are very interested in. And it has given us room to work on these issues, creating exhibitions, having debates. There is a lot of research being done. So it has actually brought us also really a lot of possibilities to work to dive deeper, let's say, into our histories, and that is extremely worthwhile.
Cultural property can be a powerful ambassador of friendship between countries. What does that paradigm look like for the relationship between the Netherlands and Sri Lanka?
Well, actually, I was really touched to be here today, and also very proud that we were able to do this together with the Sri Lankan teams. And it has really brought us so close together, because we have all worked so hard to be able to make this happen. And so you see that it creates a lot of enthusiasm on both sides. It creates pride that we were able to do this, but it also creates an appetite to continue our research together. And I think if you are working on these topics, you also get a different view of the history that has happened between our countries. And that makes it also very interesting to look at where we are today. And I think we need to realize that, arts and culture are a soft power. So they really also, give us a positive agenda where we can work together and exchange views.
My final question to you, heritage and history education play a key role in all of us understanding about our separate histories as well as our shared histories. How important is it to incorporate education about our shared histories in a meaningful manner?
Yeah, I very much agree with you. If you are intending with this question to say that we should incorporate it, I think, also for the new generations, it is a very interesting way to learn more about the history of their country, visiting these objects. I think there are a lot of visitors in the National Museum, and a big part of them are school children. And I think if you are coming here in a museum and you're seeing these objects, you're seeing this cannon, which is, it is also an object of fantasy in a way. So you are triggered and you want to know more about the history of your country. So I personally am, really convinced that for children and for schools, and also for museums that want to educate, let's say, new generations, these objects can really be helpful.
Ambassador Dewi van der Weerd, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for being here with us in Sri Lanka and in Colombo.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching us. Good night.
The People's Platform. TV1. TV for life.
Typo in the newly gazetted Sri Lanka election.